Hi everyone, my name is Jeff Edwards, and this is my final project for AEP 855. And it's entitled Multiculturalism and Resegregation. Is America Still a Melting Pot? I chose 3 articles that were all centered around these ideas of multiculturalism and also that talked about the fact that a lot of schools in America are becoming more and more segregated than they were even just 2 decades ago. The first thing I want to talk about is this idea of the melting pot. What is the melting pot? The melting pot is an idea that all children grow up knowing. We learn it in school. And America became great by being a nation that accepted immigrants from many different backgrounds and allowed them to quickly and easily become assimilated within the American culture. And this idea was actually first introduced in 1780 by J. Hector St. John de Crevecoeur, who, along with having a real mouthful of a name, he was also the first to use the analogy of melting, a melting of different immigrants and different populations to make this new American culture. The term the melting pot was actually popularized after the 1908 play entitled The Melting Pot by Israel Zangwill. And it's the idea of the melting pot became very popular, I think, because it was an easy way to suggest that new immigrants, new populations, as long as they, discarded their old values and cultures, if they quickly chose to accept the American values, American cultures, that they would be readily accepted. And my question is this an accurate metaphor for all of the American population? And I think the sad fact of the matter is that it really hasn't been for a large portion of the population. This idea that if you give up your culture and accept American values, that you will be quickly and easily assimilated into American culture, just was not a reality for many minorities. And this is a lot of people might say, oh, okay, after Brown versus Board of Education, this segregation it was outlawed. Now everyone has an equal opportunity, and segregation no longer exists. But what we have seen in the past few decades is that even after there was huge progress made on desegregating American schools, in the past 2 decades, we've seen levels of segregation in high schools or in schools in the South that are reaching levels that haven't been seen since the late 60s. A lot of this can be attributed to the fact that there just are more minorities, so obviously there's going to be a higher percentage of schools that appear segregated. But the real problem is that these schools are not only segregated, but they're also very, very unequal. Jonathan Kozol has found huge differences in per pupil spending in white majority schools as opposed to schools where a majority of the students were minorities. And some of these differences he talked about is in schools, the average school in New York City has per pupil expenditure of around $8,000, and whereas per pupil expenditure in majority white suburban schools can be as high as $18,000, $20,000, $25,000. So that the actual difference in spending between 2 students in the same public education system can be upwards of $15,000 per year. And the other problem is that these differences they extend past just expenditure. He found a lot of urban schools were offering very different curricula for their students as opposed to students in white majority schools or suburban schools not far away. For an example that he mentions is a school in central Los Angeles. Their electives for technical arts were to take classes like sewing, hairdressing, and hair braiding, while just a few miles away at Beverly Hills High School, their electives for technical arts were classes like architecture, advanced computer programming, and a lot of these classes that are going to be a lot more useful for college graduates. And it's with these kinds of inequities, even within public education, that it's really not difficult to see why this traditional idea of the American melting pot really isn't working for a lot of these students and for a lot of these minorities. You can imagine how discouraging it would be to hear people talk about the American ideal, that you can pick yourself up anywhere and become something, and then you're limited to taking courses in, taking vocational courses where what you would really want to do is get a college degree and achieve more than what your parents have achieved. And for a lot of kids, this dream is really crushed by the fact that they're unable to get the education that they need. And a lot of one of the things that has kind of developed because of this backlash against the melting pot, because of this backlash against the idea of assimilation, is the idea of multicultural education. J.A. Banks is one of the founders of the multicultural education, and he finds it to be a solid alternative to this strategy of assimilation. And one of the ideas of multicultural education is to encourage students and teachers to really challenge mainstream knowledge and try and see things from different points of view. And in this way, the students will be able to gain valuable critical thinking skills, as well as developing the types of empathy that is becoming more and more important in our globalized world. The question becomes, how can we fix this problem? It's a problem that has existed for many, many years. It's a problem that continues to get worse and will continue to get worse as this population of disillusioned students continues to grow. One of the ways that I think that we can begin to fix it is by having policymakers and political leaders who are authentic. And the reason why I think authentic leadership is necessary is because authentic leadership requires this internalized moral perspective. And the internalized moral perspective means that the leaders will use their own moral guides to guide their thinking, as opposed to letting outside groups control them. And there are many different groups that will be trying to change education, or might fight back against this idea that multicultural education is something that we need for the future, or that the idea of the melting pot and liberal assimilation isn't working anymore. So these leaders are going to need to have a very strong moral guide. They're going to need this internalized moral perspective to be able to use their own morals to guide their thinking. The next thing that I think we need is administrators and school leaders who are transformational. And the reason why I think school leaders need to be transformational is this is something that is going to be a huge problem, something that is not easily going to be fixed. So administrators need to be transformational to really help convince teachers and school populations that these changes are necessary and they're things that are going to benefit everyone in the long run. And finally, I think we need teachers who have the desire to be servant leaders. And one of the things that Banks has found in his studies of multicultural education is that teachers who have the ability to empathize with their students, who have the ability to put themselves in their students' shoes, especially minority students who struggle with identifying with teachers of different races, they need to be able to see them on their level. They need to be able to put themselves in their shoes to really be able to have an effect. All right. Here are some of my references. There are All three of them are really, really interesting articles. I would very highly suggest everyone to check those out. Thank you.